Hello, everyone. I'm glad that everyone's able to join us in community today. I am Katie Chavez, UltraViolet's Development Director, and I want to thank you all for spending time with us today and welcome you to our town hall. Today, we'll be exploring the realities of racism, misogyny, pushback, and building a feminist future together. You'll hear directly from UltraViolet team that's working hard to fight disinformation, advocate for COVID-19 relief, economic justice, racial justice, and working to dismantle the anti-abortion movement. But we also want to hear from you. So please feel free to engage with each other and us in the chat. Let us know what brought you here today or what campaigns you're passionate about. We'll also be wrapping up this town hall with a Q&A session, so please save your questions for the Q&A. And we will be recording today's event for those who aren't able to attend. So now is a good time to turn off your video if you don't want your image captured. We will be utilizing automated captions, so please remember to mute yourselves, to limit background noise and increase accessibility. Now I'm happy to introduce Mina, our individual giving manager, who will be guiding us through a grounding exercise. Thanks, Mina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mina Hawk, and I am the individual giving manager. I am so excited to be leading you all through this grounding exercise. It's a yoga breathing technique called Mrigi Mudra, which is also known as deer breath, also known as alternating nostril breathing. So before I start, I just want to preface by saying that what I'm about to share with you all is an offering. If you feel called to participate, that's great. If you just want to take a step back and observe, that's totally fine too. Just know that this is here for you whenever you need it. So let's get started. Take a comfortable seat and let's all just take a collective deep breath in and sigh it out through your mouth. Now, there are two ways to participate. Choose whichever option feels right for you. One way to participate is you take your right hand and you put your middle finger and your index finger down. And just to show like the range of motion that we're going to be using, this is what it's going to look like. Or if you want to just take your index fingers, you can do that too. I'll be using my index fingers, it's easier for me. So what we'll do is we'll take your left index finger, put it on your left nostril, take a deep breath in through your right nostril. Hold, and take your right index finger, put it over your right nostril, and slowly exhale out of the left nostril. Take a deep breath in through your left nostril. Hold, slow exhale. Deep inhale. Hold, slow exhale from the left. One more round. Deep inhale. Hold, slow exhale. Congratulations, you all just participated in yoga and you didn't even leave your seat. This exercise can be useful in managing any sort of stress, anxiety, and it's just really great way to help you stay grounded and centered anytime you feel agitated or just need to like collect your thoughts. Thank you so much for allowing me to deepen your practice, and I hope this breathing exercise comes in handy anytime you need it. So next up, I would like to introduce you all to Shivana Thomas, who is the Executive Director and co-founder at UltraViolet.
Thank you, Mina. That was awesome. And thank you, Katie, for opening us up, and to all of you who have joined today. We are, excuse me, in addition to experiencing a lot of allergies, really thrilled to welcome you as a community and to have this opportunity to talk with you about how we're taking on sexism, misogyny, racism, changing culture, policy, and politics together. 2020 was a massive year for all of us, really. And 2021 is really about building on that. The success of the work that we did together, leveraging the power that we built as a community in the face of enormous obstacles, and winning campaigns that will tangibly improve all of our lives. We launched the first disinformation campaign ever, taking on platforms for their role in exacerbating hate and real world harms against women of color candidates. We mobilized voters in battleground states to help win the presidential election. We supported the work of the organizers on the ground in Louisville to bring about a semblance of justice for Breonna Taylor. And we led a gender justice response to COVID to expose that women of color were bearing the brunt of the pandemic and should be first in line for recovery. Together, thanks to your support and activism, we forced some of the most powerful corporations and people in the world to make decisions that benefit women, from winning campaigns targeting Facebook to CBS to congressional leaders. We are making change. Today, you are going to hear from leaders at UltraViolet who are making the internet more safe for women of color, who are driving structural change to end sexual assault and harassment at work and in politics, and making sure minimum wage, paid leave, childcare, abortion access, and other structural policy solutions are at the top of the Democratic priorities in Congress and the White House. So we're going to jump into those brief overviews of our strategy now, and I look forward to a discussion about how we can work together to make change. And so now I will pass the mic over to Maria Chichov, our Vice President of Advocacy and Membership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shauna. And hi, everyone. It is so great to be here with you. So as Shauna said, my name is Maria. I'm the VP of Advocacy and Membership, and I've been at UltraViolet for going on 2 years now. And I've just been reflecting on how in the past 5 months, we've just seen a sea change in the White House. And it's not just because we have a president who doesn't go on hateful 3 a.m. Twitter tirades, or even because we have leadership that's actually doing things to improve people's lives, even though that's incredibly important, obviously. I think a really big part of this sea change is also the fact that we have a president and a vice president who center the people who are closest to the harm when they talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. So both President Biden and Vice President Harris have repeatedly talked about how Black women, Indigenous women, women of color have been at the front lines of this pandemic. And I don't think that that's just a happy coincidence. I think it's because of all of us here together and millions of others who've told our stories and who have demanded that women and women of color in particular, who are bearing the brunt of the pandemic, be at the center of the recovery. And I think it's past time that we make that a reality. So earlier this year, I think we started making progress in that direction. So as folks may remember, the American Recovery Plan, passed earlier this year, laid some essential groundwork, especially in the gender justice space. A couple of things I just want to pull out. The ARP provided $50 billion with a B to stabilize the childcare system in this country, including the child care tax credit, which will be hitting parents' bank accounts very soon. Also invested $170 billion, again with a B, in our education system to support teachers, staff, students, and parents. It provided $2,000 total in direct cash assistance to people. And it expanded access to healthcare in the midst of a pandemic, and also access to vaccines, while rejecting efforts from anti-abortion legislators to stick in any language applying abortion restriction to this money. This is a great start, but we need more. And that's why, as Congress is preparing to pass the critical infrastructure, jobs, and family legislation that's before it, we have a really important core set of demands. First, we're demanding permanent paid and sick leave for all workers, so that people can actually take time off to take care of themselves, take care of their family members, and really get better when they're feeling sick. We're demanding a childcare infrastructure that supports working parents and childcare providers so that people can so that we can have a childcare system that works. And that includes a permanent extension of the childcare tax credit, which is currently set to expire at the end of this year. Third, we're demanding a $15 minimum wage for all workers with tips on top for tipped workers so that people can go back to good paying jobs that can help them support their families. And finally, we're demanding legislation that allows people to make decisions about their own bodies, including when or if they want to start a family or expand their family. So UltraViolet is leading the We Demand More coalition in making these demands and turning them into reality. And we believe and we need a process, a Build Back Better process and movement that actually builds back better for all women. So over the coming weeks and months, we'll share opportunities with all of you to take action, to call your member of Congress, to share your story, and really advocate for the robust jobs and families legislation that we need. And I hope that you'll all join us in that moment over the summer and as we head into the fall. So now I'm going to pass things over to my colleague, Elisa, who's going to tell you about some of the other critical work that UltraViolet is driving forward.
Unmute. Thank you so much for that introduction, Maria. I'm Elisa, and I am a campaign director with UltraViolet. I am so grateful to be with all of you today. This week actually marks my 1-year anniversary at UltraViolet, and I already have so much to report back. Next slide. 2020 marked the first year in UltraViolet's history in which we went out in Spanish on the radio to help mobilize young Latina women voters. I'm happy to report that our investments and efforts paid off in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. Last week, we learned that our Spanish language radio ads, which were tailored to Cuban women in Florida, Puerto Rican women in Florida and Pennsylvania, and Mexican women in Arizona, won Best Spanish Language Radio Ad by Campaigns and Elections Magazine's annual Reads Awards. Thanks to UltraViolet donors like yourselves, we were able to make the 6-figure investment in these 3 swing states and help flip 2 of them. We later ran a tailored Spanish language radio ad in the senatorial race in Georgia and did the same to flip Georgia. Thank you so much. This victory is ours. Next slide. In addition to our Spanish language efforts, I lead our Survivor Justice campaign. Thanks to in-person and digital organizing by UltraViolet community members, we were able to ensure that Les Moonves did not receive a $120 million severance package after being ousted from CBS Corporation for sexual harassment, assault, and abuse. He's just the latest abuser we've made sure to bring to account. But I want to assure this community that in addition to getting rid of the bad apples, we're also tackling major systemic and culture change, and we're winning there too. Next slide. UltraViolet is a steering committee member of the massive multiracial coalition Survivors Agenda, which includes dozens of local, state, and national organizations. UltraViolet is specifically leading on C4 efforts to disrupt the culture of sexual violence in our politics. Next slide. Thanks to your investments and bold activism, we have brought together a subcommittee of the Survivors Agenda and collaboratively created a paradigm-shifting model for how sexual abuse allegations are handled in political workplaces. We're calling these new guidelines our Fair Process and Pledge. The process itself, it's available in a beautiful PDF file to all who would like to see it. details who and how to conduct an investigation that centers the survivor's needs and uses trauma-informed best practices. Right now, the only way for a survivor to seek justice when the perpetrator works in politics is through the media, where the investigation is winning the court of public opinion. This is traumatic and really not an investigation or justice at all. That is why we have an accompanying pledge for how accused parties should respond in the press. Next slide. This year, we have been able to begin to share this process and pledge with public officials, starting with the New York Attorney General's office, which is investigating Governor Andrew Cuomo. Part of our process was published in the Washington Post in a letter that we had addressed to New York Attorney General Letitia James. Our subcommittee recently met with her staff to both educate them about the process and pledge and also receive their feedback. Based on some of that feedback, we were able to strengthen the language and sharpen our strategy to approach other parties, such as the Democratic National Committee and state political parties. Next slide. Finally, as many of you may already know, we drove a lot of work in the Justice for Breonna Taylor campaign in the last year by helping fund on-the-ground efforts as well as media and digital strategies. This year, we continue to work with Black Lives Matter Louisville in a broader context on Black women and girls and police violence. We launched that campaign on May 1st at the Kentucky Derby. We flew an airplane banner over the Derby that read, "Protect Black women, divest from police." It received a lot of media coverage from the local, state, and national levels, including NPR, CNN, and the Associated Press. Our amazing partner on the ground, Chanel Helm, who leads on strategy at BLM Louisville, she did an amazing job at tying police violence to the ongoing violence of poverty in Louisville, such as that experienced by the Black women and mothers staffing the Kentucky Derby. Half of your donations for this work have gone directly to BLM Louisville. We have donated more than $250,000 in total to BLM Louisville. Thank you so very much for your generosity, and stay tuned for much more to come from us. I will now hand the mic to our communications director, Bridget Todd.
Thanks, Elisa. In the pandemic, much of our communications, our connections, and our sharing of critical information has all been happening online. This means that social media platforms have played an even bigger role in shaping our world. They impact our discourse, our health, and, as we saw all too clearly on January 6th, our democracy and our safety. The spread of things like disinformation, misinformation, and online harassment on platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter are not just a tech issue. They're a gender justice issue. They're a racial justice issue. When social media platforms are allowed to become cesspools of racist lies, dangerous conspiracy theories, and harassment, it is women who suffer. We know disinformation and online harassment disproportionately target and impact people from underrepresented backgrounds. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like lies about trans youth being used for the basis for harmful laws that attempt to legislate trans identity out of existence. It looks like lies about our election being used to fuel voter suppression laws that will make it harder for Black and brown folks to vote. It looks like spreading confusion and fear about vaccines and fertility. It looks like racist, sexist lies about our vice president and having a digital media ecosystem ready-made to amplify and lend credibility to those lies. Lies that we know undermine all women of color. Women of color are overwhelmingly targets for disinformation campaigns, and studies make it clear that this persistent threat has a silencing effect on all women. It pushes us even further to the margins. It keeps us from running for office or from even just expressing our opinions online. The goal of this kind of harassment is to get women to check out of our democracy altogether and for us to just shut up. We cannot allow this. Over the last year, UltraViolet has made combating hurtful disinformation and platform accountability a priority because we know that part of building an anti-racist feminist future is also building a digital media landscape where all women can fully participate. And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Katie, to explain a little bit of what I mean.
Thanks, Bridget. Hi, I'm Katie, a campaign director here leading our work on disinformation and media accountability. We've already had a lot of, sorry, all my notes just like zoomed in and now I can't read them. We've already had a lot of wins this year and I'm really excited to share them with you. So let's go to the next slide. Thanks. In the lead up to the January 5th runoff elections in Georgia, we led a coalition of more than 60 progressive groups around the country, from grassroots groups in Georgia to key racial and gender justice groups and large national progressive groups, all demanding an emergency action to address the escalating threats of violence against election workers. As a result of these efforts, Facebook adopted our recommendations around Georgia election protections for poll workers. We also released an updated version of our media guide to hold the media accountable for perpetuating racism, sexism, and disinformation, adding new sections on disability and Indigenous women. Next slide. In the wake of the white supremacist insurrection in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, we saw a major change in how social media platforms deal with people spreading lies about the 2020 election, Donald Trump being chief among them. After years of organizing by civil rights groups, including UltraViolet, who have been warning about the potential for a real-world attack resulting from online hate and disinfo, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube finally suspended Trump's accounts. Let's just take a moment to appreciate this beautiful picture of Trump's suspended account. We mobilized our members to urge the Facebook Oversight Board to keep Trump banned, and as of today, Facebook and Twitter have both taken action to keep Trump offline for the long haul, and with your help, we're pressuring YouTube to do the same. We're working with coalition partners across the progressive space to demand social media companies apply the ban more broadly to other dangerous user accounts that spread disinformation and hate speech to radicalize people. Next slide. During a major March congressional hearing about disinformation on social media, we ran ads, which you can see here, on one of the biggest DC political news sites, demanding that Congress break up big tech monopolies. Following a leak by BuzzFeed News recently regarding Facebook's plans to develop an Instagram app for kids, which would target children below 13 years and under, to use the app, we launched a campaign calling on Facebook to halt this dangerous plan. Instagram for kids could have disastrous consequences by exposing children to online bullying, toxic behavior, hate, and unhealthy body image ideas. We're working with our partners to develop and launch social media policy recommendations to address misogyny online. We already had a meeting with TikTok this month. We have a meeting scheduled with Twitter next Monday, and we have an open line of communication with Facebook. We look forward to working with all of you to get these policies in place and create a safer internet for women. Next slide. And finally, as part of our media accountability work, I wrote an op-ed for Teen Vogue calling out the media and Republican leadership for leaving the disability community behind in emergency response during the Texas power outages. Thanks for making all of this progress possible. We're excited to keep working with all of you to stop disinformation and online hate and hold the media accountable for misogyny. Next, I'll turn it over to my colleague Sonia, who leads our reproductive rights campaigns.
Thank you so much, Katie. And just, again, so proud to be part of this incredible team of staff and members here at UltraViolet. My name is Sonia Spoo. I am a campaign director and the director of reproductive rights campaigns here at UltraViolet. I've been here for about 3 years and have just been amazed by the incredible work this org has managed to move in that time. And frankly, we are at a really critical time right now in the reproductive rights, health, and justice movement. Next slide. We are at a time of incredible opportunities and also great threats that abound. So the good news first. Obviously, we have a pro-choice president and many pro-choice champions in Congress now. And we've seen the immediate ramifications of that in our policy even within the first 2 weeks of Biden's term. For example, President Biden repealed the global gag rule, which prohibited public health funding from global public health funding from going to anyone who advises on, advocates for, or refers to abortion care and family planning work overseas or HIV work, so on and so forth. This had a hugely dangerous and deadly impact on family planning and global health under the Trump administration, and Biden repealed that rule in his first 2 weeks in office. Another victory for us is that the FDA announced that they're reviewing their out-of-date restrictions on mifepristone. Mifepristone is one of the medications used for medication abortion in the first 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy. We know from years and years of studies and scientific review that it is a perfectly safe medication, and that the restrictions that the FDA has on it and has had since 2000 are no longer in sync with the scientific evidence. UV members worked last summer to advocate to the FDA and to states that also have their own restrictions to review these restrictions, what are called REMS, and hopefully to repeal them and put in more expansive access to medication abortion. And I'm happy to report that thanks to advocacy, both from friends in the movement, like in the ACLU, from members like you signing petitions and calling your lawmakers and president and the new administration, we're finally having those restrictions reviewed. So hopefully more good news will come on that front. In addition, the Biden administration is working to review and change Trump-era rules that gut family planning funding in Title X, and also redistributed funding to non-comprehensive, coercive, and manipulative fake women's health centers that did not provide the comprehensive support that, that folks who use Title X, which is a family planning program for low-income Americans, need. In addition, we have proactive pro-choice legislation being introduced in Congress, like the EACH Act, which would repeal the dangerous and deadly Hyde Amendment, which prohibits insurance programs through like Medicaid for low-income Americans, TRICARE for military members or Peace Corps members, and those who use federal health insurance programs from using that to cover abortion care. So a lot of things are moving at the federal level, both in the administrative policy realm and also within Congress. But threats do abound. States have rushed in the wake of Trump getting a third Supreme Court appointment with Amy Coney Barrett to push through even more extreme abortion restrictions. And we're seeing the fruits of that now. This week, the Supreme Court announced that they are taking up a direct challenge to Roe in Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health Center, a 15-week abortion ban case originating in Mississippi. This is the first abortion case to come before the courts since Trump appointed Amy Coney Barrett and gave the conservatives in the Supreme Court a majority. So we have that to organize around in terms of oral arguments in the fall or the spring. And that's going to be a big moment because this case is a direct challenge to the viability framework in Roe. And we know that it's both the beginning of a deluge of cases and also could be the case that does end access to legal abortion in many states, or at least severely restricts it. So while we have these opportunities and these threats, it calls for us to mobilize in big, big ways at every level, local, state, and federal. As there is restrictions moving in the states, we also see local municipalities passing, like school boards and such, passing rules that restrict sex education or that name their cities as sanctuary cities against abortion care and stuff. So we need to think about mobilization in regards to reproductive health as in a holistic, systemic way, both locally, federally, and at the state level as well. We also need to think about how we mobilize to get money out of the anti-abortion political movement. Last fall, many tens of thousands of you supported the Repro Receipts campaign, a campaign UltraViolet launched in September 2020 to call out 6 companies, AT&T, Coca-Cola, Nike, Uber, Procter & Gamble, and Disney, for their millions of dollars in support of anti-abortion politicians and candidates, despite their corporate PR about being pro-women and pro-women workers. As part of this campaign, UltraViolet has been tracking over 250 companies, the biggest companies in this country, as a matter of fact, with consumer-facing work, and how they give to anti-abortion candidates. And we are continuing this work. In the wake of the insurrection, we know we are at a pivotal moment as a lot of corporations do some performative soul searching about their political giving and how it enables extremist politicians. And we know that anti-abortion views are a bellwether for a larger extremist framework that's not only anti-abortion, but is anti-LGBTQ rights, anti-racial justice, anti-science, and now increasingly anti-democracy. And some of the fruits of that is in the insurrection, where of the 147 members of Congress who objected to the certification of the 2020 election results, all 147 members were anti-choice, and all of them were supported by the likes of AT&T through their political giving. So as we look forward to the work ahead, we are going to need all of you guys to continue to mobilize with us as you have in the past, signing petitions, calling out corporations, harnessing our power as consumers to organize both offline as it becomes safer to organize offline, like outside of corporate headquarters and meetings, online to pressure them right where they see it, and they begin to kind of feel some panic when they see those kind of viral moments happening online, and then also through advocacy in Congress to ensure both no abortion restrictions and subsequent relief packages or recovery packages for COVID, as well as to push forward proactive pro-choice legislation going forward. So we look forward to continuing to work with you guys as our members to push forward progress on reproductive justice, to organize ahead of the Supreme Court case to pressure the court to do the right by their own precedent, and to get funding, get money out of the anti-choice movement ahead of the 2020 midterms. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kathy Plate, who is our Director of Membership and Growth.
Thanks, Sonia. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. This is really great. As Sonia said, I'm the Director for Growth and Member Experience at UltraViolet, and I've been on the team for 7 years. And before I joined UltraViolet, I was the Digital Director at the National LGBTQ Task Force. There, I worked on campaigns for marriage equality, what has now evolved into the Equality Act, but was then called the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, with a few other changes too, and on distributing the first of its kind national survey on transgender discrimination. One of the things we were wary of at the task force was that we would see a backlash, most likely against trans members of the community, if marriage equality finally became the law of the land. And I think the attacks we're seeing now across the country against trans folks are in fact part of that backlash. Of course, winning marriage equality has been huge, both legally in terms of the way our culture has shifted, but we're now seeing these rising attacks from the opposition. This year alone, hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures around the country. Many of them are trying to block access for sports and gender affirming healthcare for trans kids, and too many are being presented under the guise of protecting women and girls. But we know that couldn't be further from the truth. What we do know is that trans youth are at a higher risk of death by suicide than their cisgender peers. But when trans youth receive the support of their family and community, as well as gender affirming healthcare, the risk of death by suicide declines dramatically. In addition to harming trans and gender nonconforming youth, these bills have racist and sexist impacts. In Arkansas, the bill specifically ties womanhood to the ability to bear children. And if you're wondering if the same people pushing these bills are anti-abortion, you would be correct. They are people who want to reinforce sexist traditional gender roles, and they don't want women in particular to have bodily autonomy. Some of the bills would also allow children to be subjected to genital exams, and we know from experiences from USA Gymnastics and other institutions just how problematic it can be for coaches and others to be given such a task. Finally, these laws will no doubt be racist in their impact because they rely on traditional notions of femininity derived primarily from white feminine norms and would absolutely have especially negative consequences for young girls of color who already suffer from being overly policed and punished in schools. So to fight back, we've joined the Equality Time Coalition, a coalition of over 75 civil rights groups advocating for the passage of the Equality Act, which would update existing civil rights protections to provide consistent and explicit non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people across key areas of life, including employment, housing, credit, education, public spaces, and more. We've worked to organize fellow gender justice and women's rights groups to speak out against these bills, and thousands of UltraViolet members like you have already advocated for the Equality Act, sending letters and making calls to Congress. I want to thank all of you who've already taken action, and if you haven't yet, we're going to drop a link in the chat for you to take a look and sign on. Thanks so much, and I'm going to pass it back to Shauna.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, Kathy and everybody. So we, for that great overview, we can't, wait to hear your reactions. Really appreciate those of you who are already speaking up in the chat. And we are going to get to your questions and your feedback next. Of course, we're very excited about the increased impact we've been able to have over the past couple of years, and our ability to continue to grow and have an even bigger impact is really both about bringing in new people, right, to the community and raising resources. And we're grateful for any way that you can contribute to that growth. So on that note, before we jump into questions, I've been asked to give you a sense of our budget progress for this year and what it's going to take for us to be successful. Some of you may know we have two kind of sister organizations. We have a 501c3 called the UltraViolet Education Fund, which does issue education, cultural campaigning, essentially everything non-political as permitted by the IRS, and that budget's $3 million. We've raised to date $2 million for the year, and so we're therefore $1 million away from our goal on that. Under UltraViolet Action, which is our 501c4, under that is where we do our issue advocacy, holding electeds accountable to a gender justice agenda. That has a 2021 core operating budget of 1.1 million, and we've raised nearly $1 million this year. So we've made significant progress. We still have a little ways to go. But I do want to note what I just described is really our core operating support. That's our staff, that's our digital campaigns. We also have a goal of raising an additional $3 million split between the C3 and the C4 that I just described to take the Women's Disinformation Defense Project and really all of our disinformation work to scale. So we're working hard to raise resources for both entities. If you'd like to see a more detailed breakdown of what we've raised and what we have left to raise, Kaylin and Katie and her team would be happy to share that information. But for now, I'm going to pass the mic to Bridget Todd again to facilitate the Q&A portion of this call.
Thank you, Shauna. I'm grateful for folks chiming in the chat with questions. We'd love to know what questions, comments do you have about what you've heard. You can either unmute yourself and ask questions just vocally, or you can feel free to drop them in the chat. Oh, you should be able to unmute yourself, Julia, if you're trying to ask a question. Oh, 1 second. Sorry about that. You can drop your questions in the chat for now, and we will work on giving folks the ability to unmute themselves.
Sure. I think I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bridget. I have one question. I've been with you guys since inception. I was really excited even when I was a grad student to finally see a group dedicated to women's rights specifically, which is something that was missing. Where does UltraViolet come in on school reopening? I mean, it seems to me this is one of the biggest issues women have faced in the last decades now, with like working women in droves having to retreat from the workforce, and gains that have been made in equality rapidly slipping backwards. And somehow I don't hear anything. I don't see any action. I instead see praise for budget bills by the Biden administration that have done absolutely nothing for families and just ultimately given monies to teachers who just sitting at home with that money and being paid while we teach our own children at home and while we supervise our children the whole day, at the same time shouldering burden of housework and work.
I'm going to pass that question over to my colleague, Maria.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. And I will just start off by saying that as a working parent, I very much just feel that on a very personal level. So I think there's a couple of things that I want to say here. I think that, you know, I spoke about the work that we are really pushing around investments in childcare. I think that's one essential piece of this puzzle for all parents. And like I said, in the American Recovery Plan, there was $50 billion to stabilize the childcare infrastructure. But like stabilize, when we say stabilize, we literally mean make sure that things don't get worse. That is not sort of that's the floor, that is not the ceiling. And that's why we are advocating for a further expansion of childcare and also a further expansion of aid to schools to ensure that you know, teachers, families, people are getting the support that they need, and we're not there yet. And so that's why I think it's going to be so essential for us as we head into the summer and into the fall, that when we are talking to our members of Congress, we're really sharing our stories as parents who are also teachers, who are also caretakers, who are also all of these other things, and demanding that members of Congress make the investments that make it possible for women to get back to work, for kids to get back into the classroom, and for us to do it safely, and also to make sure that, you know, childcare workers are being compensated fairly, and that we actually have an infrastructure that works for all of us.
All right, but I mean, just to say that the infrastructure is already there, it's just not open, right? So how do we deal with that? Do we really want to introduce a complete new package for childcare? I mean, most parents I know with younger children actually do have childcare currently. I mean, the dividing line is all the private institutions are open, all the unionized institutions are not open. And ultimately, you know, why can't we just open the schools? I mean, that's like the first thing that needs to be mandated. I think there would be a much quicker action. The infrastructure is already there. We have been paying all along full. And then in addition, additional investments have been made. Teachers are vaccinated. It's not open, right? So, I mean, that's a very simple solution without actually coming up with new investment and improvements of childcare that are undoubtedly necessary. But I mean, you could fix the problem very easily just by mandating reopening of schools.
You know, I think that's, you know, I really appreciate that perspective. And I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we are, as we're building back, we are building back better. And I think that, to your point, that includes reopening schools, but it also includes investing in that. I do want to make sure that we're able to get to, I'm seeing a bunch of questions in the chat, so I want to make sure that we can get to more questions, but definitely feel free to reach out over email. Love to continue that conversation. And I'll pass this back to Bridget.
Thank you, Maria. Nura, I see that you asked a question. Do you feel comfortable just asking it out loud? Nura, are you able to ask your question? All right, so I'll move on to another question. Oh, there you go.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
You're a little garbled, but
she's still.
Can you hear me now?
She's still blocked.
Nura, can you hear us?
I can.
So you sound a little garbled. I'm not able to hear your question.
I think I have the question here, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank
Scroll
you.
up for it. Yeah,
Great.
Would that be helpful? Okay, so I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a little long, but hopefully it gets it across. So Nura says, thanks for this call, UltraViolet. We appreciate your work, et cetera, et cetera. For example, while following events in other parts of the world, case Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, I've yet to read about this injustice in feminist circles in the US. Women and children are mentioned only in a general context when the larger picture portrays the Israelis as quote unquote humane victors. This also pertains to Afghanistan, Iraq, and coverage of other nations still suffering from negative effects of colonization, corruption, and violent conflict. I'm going to move into like the question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What, talking about like language used to talk about these human rights atrocities. What language does this, like, what language does this, what does this do to the human psyche? What are groups like UltraViolet doing? I think this is the question. What are groups like UltraViolet doing to offer a more realistic, fairer perspective rather than a one-sided Eurocentric or North American-centric lens when discussing these issues, as other groups have done when discussing the West? Any suggestions?
Thank you for reading that. I'm going to throw to my colleague, Katie.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about the fundraising aspect of this, and then I'm going to pass it back to Maria because I think Maria also has stuff to add. But so from a fundraising standpoint, when I was living in Hawaii, I actually was a co-author of the nation's first feminist economic recovery plan. So within our fundraising work at UV, we are taking more of a non-imperialist, non-Western approach to the way that we do fundraising and what we hope will be the world, a change in the world. So what that looks like for me would, and I'm also Native, so as a Native person, I think also my lens is from an Indigenous worldview, which is very different from the Western imperialist worldview. So it would look like a deep structural transition to a feminist economy that values work that we know is essential to sustaining us. So that would look like healthcare, social, ecological, economic policies that are better for all women and centering BIPOC folks and LGBTQ folks. I think that the COVID pandemic really laid bare that policies aren't working right now. So that would also look like, Indigenous-led, BIPOC-led knowledge developed in honoring people in place and knowledge from those that have been historically marginalized and disenfranchised in these conversations that are happening at the table. So for UV, that looks like economic support, like better infrastructure for high-risk groups, for parents and caregivers, health and healthcare programs, institutions. So I think from my perspective, we're really, really trying to center those BIPOC voices and marginalized folks that haven't been at the table. And, with our staff, most of us are BIPOC on staff. So it's really kind of shifting the way that we do the work in the system. And then also like calling our coalition partners to account when like the values aren't matching up with what we're espousing. So I think that there's many steps to take in the nonprofit industrial complex, but we are working internally at UltraViolet and with coalition partners to kind of move the discussion in that direction and organize with other like-minded folks to get money to frontline organizations and do lots of work with people that should be centered.
Thank you, Katie. Maria, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Katie said it beautifully. I just, the things that I would also add to that is that, we as an organization, while our focus is primarily US based, we stand in solidarity with people all over the world who are oppressed through racist, misogynist, capitalist, colonialist actions. And so I think that that's something that we're constantly pushing ourselves to think about. What are the ways in which UltraViolet and UltraViolet members can take action? We see these issues as being deeply intersectional, and we know that, what happens in the United States is not limited to our borders, and also what happens outside of the United States is not limited to those places. And we're really, we are fighting to build a world beyond white supremacist patriarchy. I also think the other, just like very concretely, the things that we've been thinking a lot about is lifting up the voices of members of Congress, Black, Indigenous, women of color in Congress, thinking specifically this week about Representative Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and really standing in solidarity and with these folks and ensuring that we have their back as they are speaking out through both our disinformation work and just by lifting up their voices.
Thank you for that, Maria. Next up, we have a great question from Galaxy. So far, there have been more murders of trans people, mostly women of color, than all of last year. Is UltraViolet partnering with any trans advocacy groups? To talk about that, I'm going to throw it to my colleague, Kathy.
Hey, thanks, Bridget. So yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely. And you're right, it's a terrible statistic, and we do know that violence against trans women, and particularly trans women of color, has been rising. And we've been working, as I mentioned, in partnership with the Equality Time Coalition, which has a bunch of civil rights, LGBTQ, and specifically trans advocacy organizations involved in it. And we were actually just co-sponsors on an event called The Power of Us that focused on trans, gender nonconforming, and genderqueer folks and what we can be doing to advocate for rights. While there was sort of a Q&A portion of that too, so that folks who aren't as plugged in to the movement yet could learn more in a safe environment and ask those questions. And then in addition, I just wanted to mention that in the Survivors Agenda work that Elisa leads for us, there's trans orgs involved in that, and we're approaching that work in a trans inclusive way. And then also the work we're doing to combat police violence. Unfortunately, the violence against trans women is also violence that happens from the police. So the work we're doing there is inclusive of that too. And we definitely hope to do more of that work in the coming years, because I think it's really a vital place for us to be working. So thank you so much for asking that question.
Thank you for that. Elisa, as the person who owns so much of our survivor justice work, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. So we actually do work with a lot of Black trans organizations and organizers specifically, both in our survivor justice work. And also we regularly integrated into our campaigns uplift grassroots organizers on the ground in mobile digital billboards and helping them with capacity and media and digital strategy. For the inauguration, we had a celebratory digital billboard in which we lifted up 6 Black women's voices that helped flip in the election. And one of them was Kendall Stevens, a Black trans activist in Pennsylvania, who did a lot of GOTV work there. So yes, we make sure to center those voices in all of our work.
Thank you, Elisa. We had another question, I think I lost it in the chat here, regarding our work and the minimum wage, what we're doing to support folks who are minimum wage workers. I would love to throw it to my colleague Sonia to discuss some of that work. Oh, I found the question. It was Anne. What are you doing and who are you working with for the $15 an hour fair minimum pay? Though not quite, since it's hard to raise a family on $30,000 a year, it absolutely is. Sonia, I would love for you to speak to that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, completely agree that $15 is a floor, not a ceiling. And we certainly need to keep advocating and pushing for even more. And part of this work is with the Raise the Wage Act, making sure that there's automatic increases and reviews of the minimum wage instead of having to go through the legislative process each time. So what we're doing, UV has actually invested quite a bit of our time and energy into raising the wage, because we know that raising the wage will disproportionately impact women and families, especially women of color. So we've worked with our partners, One Fair Wage, Women's March, and many others, local and state partners like UltraAZ and others across the country, at a variety of actions targeting holdout senators or senators who voted against the amendment process during the ARP fight or against so on. So for example, in Arizona, we worked with unions, UltraAZ, One Fair Wage, restaurant owners and such to do actions targeting Senator Sinema for her for her vote during the American Rescue Plan amendment process against a minimum wage increase. And also thanked Senator Kelly, for example, for his support of it in Arizona. We've also been working on various events like helping support various strikes coming up, which we'll be getting invites for soon, with one fair wage, pressuring the Biden administration to actually spend political capital on figuring out a path forward to raise the wage, whether it's through reconciliation and trying to work through the parliamentarian process, overrule the parliamentarian, or through another vehicle. We just want to see the White House set a clear path forward for how President Biden will make good on his promise to voters, especially voters of color and women who put him into power to raise a wage this year. So we are working with a variety of stakeholders and partners across the country, locally and nationally, to continue to rev up pressure on lawmakers to include raising the minimum wage with tips on top for tip workers, as Maria mentioned, here in DC, and also working to ensure that whether it comes to reconciliation or we had to get rid of the filibuster, that raise the wage happens as soon as possible.
Thank you for that answer. We got a question earlier. When was UltraViolet founded? Shauna, you know a lot about this. I'm going to throw to you to give some perspective.
I do. I was there. Thank you for that question. It's actually like an exciting answer because we were founded in 2012. It was myself, Anita Chaudhry, and a whole lot of people who were ready to see kind of a digital first rapid response organization that was going to, mobilize a lot of people to demonstrate that we could create a cost for sexism and make some headway on misogyny and racism together. And the reason I say it's so exciting is because 2022 will be our 10-year anniversary, and we're so excited and planning already on how we're going to reflect on kind of what we did together as a community, what we accomplished over the last 10 years. I don't think that people, everybody always remembers that, like in 2012, feminism was not, this is my anecdote, right, that I like to say. Beyonce was asked, are you a feminist? And she said, I believe in women's equality. I'm not sure I would say I was a feminist. And very shortly thereafter, she was, on tour with feminism in giant blinking lights on her stage. So to say that there has been culture change and culture shift, I think over the last 10 years is an understatement. UltraViolet played a big role in that. And what we're going to be talking about next year is what we need to work together to do to build on that power and to accomplish over the next 10. And I'm thrilled to talk to you all more over the next year about what that's going to look like. So I appreciate the question and excited about what it means for 2022.
Thank you, Shauna. Even though I know about the founding of UltraViolet, it's still so fun and exciting to hear the story again. So I love that. And I think that's a great place for us to close. Thank you so much for all of your engagement and your questions. If your question was not answered, you can definitely email us or hit us up and we would love to answer it. And also thank you so much for everyone deciding to spend your day with us today. It is such a deep honor to be in community with all of you. And we really look forward to building this beautiful, feminist, anti-racist future that I know is possible. For the most urgent and up-to-date actions with us, you can join our mobile list by texting the word join to the number 98688. We'll also put that number in the chat. Another thing you can do to help us make an impact is invite your friends to join by texting 98688. And for those of you who have access to wealth and you're interested in learning more about how you can shift your individual and institutional giving, please contact KD. They will work with you in exploring philanthropy's role and responsibility in the gender justice movement. Again, I thank you so much for being in community with us, and we can't wait to hear more.